What would you do if your neighbor started invading your private property, using your pool without permission, and then tried to ruin your peace with lies and manipulation? You'd be frustrated, right? But what if the way you handled it didn't just protect your home, but also turned the tables on them in the most unexpected way? Stick around, because this is a story of how one man turned the tables on his entitled neighbor in the most unforgettable way, and trust me, you won't believe what happened next. Tom Andrews had spent his entire life working hard, pushing himself beyond the limits for one goal: to retire peacefully and enjoy the fruits of his labor. After years of long hours and countless days spent serving the community as a police officer, he finally bought the house of his dreams, a modest 2-story home in a quiet, picturesque neighborhood. It was more than just a house to Tom. It was a symbol of his perseverance and dedication. He could finally sit back, enjoy a cool drink by the pool, and breathe a sigh of relief. This was his time, no more chasing after trouble or dealing with the chaos that used to consume his days. He could finally enjoy a slower pace, surrounded by a sense of calm, the soft lapping of pool water against the sides, the rustling of leaves from the trees, and the occasional chirp of birds. It was everything he had dreamed of, a personal sanctuary to reflect and relax. But Tom didn't expect that his slice of paradise would soon be invaded by the very thing that had always brought him joy: his backyard pool. The incursion began subtly, a simple glance from across the yard, followed by polite waves that slowly transformed into something much more alarming. Linda Harris, a woman in her late 40s who lived next door, initially seemed like an ordinary neighbor. At first, Tom welcomed her warm greetings, but soon, her seemingly innocent attention morphed into invasive curiosity. He felt her eyes on him while lounging by the pool, and it made him uneasy. One day, returning from the grocery store, Tom walked into his backyard only to find Linda casually walking through his open gate. With a sun hat perched atop her head and a towel draped over her arm, she looked as if she owned the place. "Excuse me," Tom said, bewildered at her audacity. "You can't just come onto my property like this." "Oh, I thought the pool was still shared with the old owners," she said, a hint of condescension spiking her tone. Tom's blood boiled. He maintained his composure and politely asked her to leave, reminding her that the pool was private property now. Linda didn't seem to care. She waved her hand dismissively, her feigned innocence infuriating Tom. "I'm sure there's been some mistake. I'll just go ahead and leave then," she said, leaving Tom with a nagging feeling that this was just the beginning of something more troubling. As days turned into weeks, her behavior escalated. Tom began to notice Linda lurking around his yard, peering through windows, and making no attempt to hide her presence. It felt as though she was testing the boundaries, seeing what she could get away with. Tom, a man accustomed to challenges, felt an unsettling mix of frustration and disbelief grow within him. The final straw came one Saturday morning when he discovered Linda hosting a pool party with her friends in his backyard while he was away. They lounged and laughed as though they owned his space. This would not stand. Taking a deep breath, he stepped outside, his voice firm. "You need to leave immediately. This is private property." Linda turned, shock etched on her face briefly before it morphed into defiance. "Oh, come on. It's just a little fun," she exclaimed, waving her arms dismissively. "We were just enjoying the sunshine." Tom's patience was at its breaking point. He reiterated, "This is my property, and I didn't give you permission. If you don't leave now, I'll call the police." Linda scoffed but was visibly annoyed. Her friends began to gather their things, their highly tuned laughter fading into embarrassment. But it was too late. The seeds of chaos had already been sown. Tom felt the determination settle within him. The gloves were off. He wouldn't let Linda run amok and displace his hard-earned peace. Instead of fueling the flames with anger, he decided it was time to stand his ground firmly but smartly. A plan formed in his mind, one that would not only address Linda's blatant invasion, but also reclaim his tranquil sanctuary without a confrontation. After weeks of turmoil, he was ready to play the long game, a tactical chess match that would turn the tide and teach Linda a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. Little did he know how tumultuous this journey would become as it unfolded, a battle not just for his property, but for respect, dignity, and the reclaiming of his happiness. The stakes were high, and as Tom watched Linda retreat with a haughty smirk, he could almost feel the winds of change stirring. Little did he know how tumultuous this journey would become as it unfolded, a battle not just for his property, but for respect, dignity, and the reclaiming of his happiness. The stakes were high, and as Tom watched Linda retreat with a haughty smirk, he could almost feel the winds of change stirring. Tom knew he needed a strategy, one that would not only protect his home, but also show Linda that her manipulative tactics had consequences. He spent a couple of days contemplating the best approach while quietly observing what Linda did when she thought no one was watching. He installed multiple security cameras around his property, capturing every interaction, every trespass, and every attempt at intimidation. Evidence was essential. He wouldn't confront her until he had a solid case to present. With the cameras operational, Tom implemented a new routine. He began to engage with other neighbors, deliberately sharing what he had documented with those he could trust. It was essential for him to regain their support and build a rapport amidst the chaos Linda had sown. He was determined to make the subtle shift in feelings towards him due to Linda's lies dissipate like mist in the morning. As the days passed, he learned that Linda wasn't just a nuisance. She had a reputation. Other neighbors started coming forward with their own stories, tales of Linda's passive-aggressive behavior and entitlement that had long been overlooked. Tom listened attentively, absorbing their experiences, and beginning to piece together a collective narrative to counter Linda's manipulation. It was at a neighborhood barbecue that the tension began to crack. Tom shared a few laughs and swapped stories with the Johnsons next door, and even Mrs. Rodriguez felt bold enough to share how Linda once tried to enforce an HOA rule on her holiday decorations. The shared camaraderie felt reassuring, and for the first time in weeks, Tom felt a sense of community rising up around him. Then, one afternoon while sipping coffee on his patio, Tom caught sight of Linda's shadow in the corner of his yard. She was bending down, seeming to fiddle with the lock on his gate. His heart raced. This was the first time he had directly witnessed her trying to breach his property after their last confrontation. He grabbed his phone and quickly recorded her actions, his mind racing as he considered his options. Should he confront her now, or wait for a better opportunity? As Linda stood up, seemingly satisfied with her clumsy attempt, a light bulb went off in Tom's mind. Rather than startling her with anger, he would keep his cool and let his documentation speak for itself later. Tom resolved to take a different approach to escalate the situation without being overt. He discreetly adjusted the cameras to capture every motion on his property and began to document every detail of his encounters with her. Each time he caught her trespassing, he made note of it in his meticulous log. As the days turned into sleepless nights of meticulous planning, Tom felt a sense of urgency, a powerful need to protect his sanctuary from this entitled intruder. Frustration and determination intertwined within him, fueling his desire for a peaceful resolution that would not only safeguard his home, but also shine a light on Linda's manipulative games. One afternoon, he noted that Linda was cleaning up her yard while eyeing his pool. He watched her from the safety of his kitchen, the cameras recording her every move. What would be her next step? How far was she willing to go? The tension in the air felt thick enough to cut. That evening, while going through the footage, Tom noticed something peculiar. Linda had been actively engaging with others in the community, spinning a narrative that painted herself as the victim caught in the web of a grumpy old man. The more he watched her act, the more he realized she was orchestrating a public relations campaign to rally support against him. Tom sighed deeply, a mix of anger and disappointment washing over him. But where others saw a desperate play for sympathy, he saw an opportunity. He carefully crafted a plan that would not only reclaim his peace, but also turn the tables on Linda. He reached out to some close neighbors he knew would have his back and invited them over for a small gathering, nothing too flashy, just a simple evening barbecue. He made arrangements to ensure everyone could see the footage he had been documenting over the last few weeks, displaying Linda's increasingly invasive behavior with undeniable clarity. As the sun dipped below the horizon on the day of the barbecue, Tom felt a surge of nerves. Would they believe him? Would they stand by his side, or simply take Linda's word? He prepared himself to face the community, knowing the outcome could determine his peace of mind moving forward. But as he set the grill ablaze in his backyard, an ember of hope flickered within him. This might be the turning point he had been waiting for. The evening unfolded with laughter and light-hearted conversations, and slowly, with each sip of lemonade and every shared story, the atmosphere shifted. Tom's friends began to see the divide that Linda had stratified over the months, and how her manipulative nature had fundamentally changed the dynamics of their small community. Finally, Tom gathered everyone around the outdoor screen, heart pounding in his chest as he pressed play on the video he had compiled. As the footage rolled, Linda in his pool, her comments about him, and the encounters that felt invasive, the initial shock gave way to an understanding. Gasps filled the air as they witnessed Linda's audacity and blatant disregard for his property, a stark contrast to the version of events she had shared with them. Tom watched as the looks on their faces morphed from disbelief to indignation, his heart swelling with reassurance. One neighbor spoke out, "I can't believe she did this. We need to support you, Tom," and another chimed in, "This isn't just your battle, it's ours too." The tide was turning, and with it, their collective strength surged. The more they discussed, the more Tom realized they weren't just seeing his plight, they were uniting in the face of Linda's manipulation. This was a moment of courage and community he had longed for, the sense of belonging he thought had faded. Tom could see a path forward, a chance not only to reclaim his peace but to help rebuild a community that had been stained by one person's entitlement. As the night rolled on, laughter and camaraderie flowed, further drowning out the disparaging tales Linda had spun. Their voices echoed with determination, ready to confront Linda's deceptive hold over the neighborhood. And as Tom stood in the glow of the twilight, surrounded by newfound allies, he knew one thing: this was only the beginning. The next chapter in this saga of neighbors would be one for the books, and in the battle of manipulation versus honesty, he finally felt like he, alongside his neighbors, had the upper hand. And as Tom stood in the glow of the twilight, surrounded by newfound allies, he knew one thing: this was only the beginning. The next chapter in this saga of neighbors would be one for the books, and in the battle of manipulation versus honesty, he finally felt like he, alongside his neighbors, had the upper hand. With a fresh resolve lighting up his spirit, Tom spent the following days rallying support in his community. He organized mob backyard gatherings, this time inviting not just those who had seen his footage, but even those who were neutral or previously siding with Linda. He arranged for casual meet and greets where residents could engage in open discussions about community values, personal boundaries, and respect for private property. As Tom's presence grew stronger in the neighborhood, so did the tales of Linda's entitlement. Bit by bit, the mask she wore began to slip, and residents were noticing the discrepancy between her facade of friendliness and her covert aggressive behavior. The word spread like wildfire. Whispers of her shady tactics and passive-aggressive antics floated through the streets, igniting a collective awareness. Linda, unaware of the brewing storm, continued her typical routine of trying to undermine Tom's standing in the community. Often seen throwing glances at his gatherings, she attempted to put herself in the spotlight as the concerned citizen, fueling her narrative that Tom was a hermit who just wanted to isolate himself. However, what she didn't realize was that while she plotted her schemes, Tom's bond with his neighbors tightened with each gathering. With newfound unity, Tom shared ideas about starting regular neighborhood meetings, entirely focused on building a stronger community. He suggested forming a neighborhood watch, not just to keep an eye on safety, but to actively promote communication and camaraderie among residents. He wanted to lay down the foundation for a solid support network, where everyone could feel secure in their homes and confident in their voices. At one of these meetings, as Tom sat before his audience, he felt a surge of purpose. With a whiteboard behind him, he outlined the importance of looking out for one another, and how respect for individual privacy is the cornerstone of a healthy neighborhood. The residents nodded, engaged with his words, a shared determination reflected in their eyes. Yet, as he spoke, he was acutely aware of Linda's presence. She stood tentatively at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, observing with eyes sharp as daggers. He noticed the tension in the air shift as her glare met his, and for a fleeting moment, he could feel her pressing challenge. It was clear she would not give up her aim without a fight, but Tom felt fortified by the support surrounding him. The very next day, however, tensions escalated. Linda, evidently desperate to salvage her reputation, turned her strategy up a notch. She began to bellow accusations loudly enough for those in the neighborhood to hear, claiming Tom was a bully for trying to build walls against her. His trying to shut down any enjoyment we might have in this neighborhood, she declared, her voice dripping with false indignation. Tom felt a pang of frustration. It was infuriating to see someone twist reality so blatantly. But instead of lashing out, he stood firm. Words of encouragement from his neighbors lingered in his ears. Stay the course. He knew it was crucial not to let Linda's efforts derail the community he was nurturing. That evening, he called an impromptu meeting, a sort of community forum to address Linda's claims head-on. His goal was clear. He wanted to disarm her manipulative tactics within a safe space, allowing the neighbors to speak up without fear of retribution or judgment. As everyone gathered under the canopy of twinkling stars, Tom took a deep breath. Tonight, we're creating an open dialogue, he announced, projecting confidence. Anyone who feels affected by recent events is encouraged to share their thoughts. With neighbors comfortably mingling, one brave resident rose to share her experience with Linda. She once tried to tell me how to raise my children, calling my parenting methods outdated, she said, her voice steady. I realize showcasing behavior like that represents a larger issue. Another neighbor stood and added, I think it's excellent that we're doing this. The last thing we need is division created by one person to feed her narrative. The testimonies rolled in, and a chorus of support began to grow as more residents shared similar experiences. With every story shared, it became clearer that they were not isolated in their encounters with Linda. This was not just a tale of Tom versus Linda. It was about the community standing together against one individual's self-serving manipulations. In the midst of this newfound solidarity, Tom felt a weight gradually lift. It was apparent Linda's intricate web of deceit was starting to unravel, and as more stories emerged, it fueled the fire of determination within him. However, it was when one kind neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, spoke about her own experiences that a new trajectory unfurled. Friends, this isn't just about how Linda has made us feel. It's about the values we uphold together as a community. We shouldn't let one person dictate how we live. It's time we rise and make a stand. With that, a powerful resolution began to stir among the group. They unanimously agreed to enact an open community pledge. They would respect each other's privacy, stand against manipulation, and foster an environment rooted in mutual trust and understanding. Tom glanced around, recognizing the shared commitment in the eyes of his neighbors. As the meeting drew to a close, he felt an overwhelming sense of purpose and an even stronger bond with the community around him. Together, they were no longer just a group of individuals. They became a collective force determined to uphold dignity and integrity in their neighborhood. Soon after, they decided the next step would be to confront Linda collectively, a community meeting with a clear agenda, where everyone would lay their truths bare and communicate their intentions for a harmonious neighborhood. Tom couldn't help but feel a ripple of anticipation run through him as the moment drew nearer. It was a strategic play that would undoubtedly catch Linda off guard. United and resolute, he and his neighbors stood on the brink of a confrontation that would reshape their lives and reclaim what had been lost: peace, clarity, and trust in their community. This was not just about defending their homes anymore. It was about standing for what was right. And they were ready to face the storm together. This was not just about defending their homes anymore. It was about standing for what was right. And they were ready to face the storm together. As the day of the confrontation approached, the air was thick with anticipation. Tom could feel a mixture of excitement and trepidation coursing through him. He sent out invitations to all the residents, crafted with care to ensure that everyone understood the purpose: a community dialogue, a command to set the record straight, and an assertion of their collective values. It was time for Linda to see that her reign of manipulation was coming to an end. On the evening of the meeting, the neighborhood community center buzzed with energy. Neighbors gathered, some catching up over cups of coffee, others quietly summoning courage as they settled into the arrangement of chairs set up facing the front. Tom looked around, taking comfort in the camaraderie built over shared stories and mutual support. As he prepared to speak, an unsettling thought crossed his mind. Would Linda even show up? Would she dare confront the gathering she had thoughtlessly tried to dismantle? As if sensing his uncertainty, Mrs. Johnson placed a reassuring hand on Tom's shoulder. We're with you. No matter what happens tonight, we stand together. Just as the meeting commenced, the door swung open with a creak, drawing the room's attention. Tom's heart raced as all eyes turned to Linda, who entered with an air of false confidence, her lips twisting into a brittle smile. She surveyed the room like a predator assessing its prey, but when her gaze landed on Tom's resolute determination, a flicker of unease crossed her face. "Thank you all for coming," Tom began, his tone steady and clear. "Tonight, we are here to discuss how we can fortify our community and address some ongoing issues that have been affecting us all." Linda feigned nonchalance, crossing her arms defensively as he spoke, but it was evident she was on edge. The residents, now emboldened, echoed their support, nodding and murmuring phrases of agreement. The strength of their collective voices filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds, illuminating the truth they sought to assert. One by one, they shared their stories, recounting instances of Linda's disruptive behavior. Each account was like a link being forged in a chain of solidarity. From Linda taking liberties with property boundaries to her unsolicited criticisms of others' lifestyles, it became apparent that her attempts to pit neighbors against one another had backfired. The tales resonated, and Tom felt a growing empowerment among them. Finally, Mrs. Johnson spoke again, this time direct and unflinching. "Linda, you've been divisive. We all care about our neighborhood, and this hostility can't continue. It's time to put an end to this." The tension in the room crackled, and Tom felt the air thicken as Linda bristled visibly, her facade cracking. "You're all misunderstanding me," she retorted, her voice rising. "I only speak with concern for the community." But her plea sounded hollow amid the mounting evidence against her. Tom took a breath, grounding himself. "We understand the importance of community, but we also value respect. Manipulation refuses to foster trust, and that's what you've done, Linda. We're determined not to let that continue." The room erupted in agreement, neighbors clapping, some rising to their feet as they voiced solidarity. It was a wave of resolve that could not be contained, and Linda's defiant expression began to morph into one of uncertainty. With mounting courage, they confronted Linda with the promise they had formed, to support each other, embrace open communication, and cultivate a space where none would feel isolated or belittled. Each pledge they made was a brick in the wall they were constructing, one that would protect their sense of community against manipulation. As the conversation reached its climax, Tom leaned in, feeling the palpable energy of the gathering. "We want peace among us, Linda. We want to work together. If that means standing against behaviors that divide us, then we will do it as one." Linda's expression shifted from fury to disbelief. The attempts to sway public opinion had failed, and the insurrection she had attempted to orchestrate was instead a revolt in support of Tom. The very community she believed she could control had turned on her, and she stood before them, isolated in the reality of her actions. Tom watched as Linda's bravado began to wither under the weight of collective scrutiny. Her voice, once filled with disdain, trembled as she sputtered denials, but it was clear that a reckoning had come. I only wanted what I thought was best," she stammered, but the sincerity of her words no longer resonated. "Best for whom?" a neighbor shouted, the outburst reverberating through the room. "This is about you maintaining control, and we won't allow it." With every voice raised in defiance, Tom realized this was the moment they had all been waiting for, the moment the community would reclaim its identity, standing strong against the shrubs of manipulation that had taken root. They were no longer pawns in Linda's game. They had become a unified front. As the meeting concluded, Tom looked at Linda one last time. "It's time to let go of these games," he said thoughtfully. "Let's take this energy and shift toward building what truly matters, supporting one another instead of tearing each other down." With heads held high, Tom and his neighbors stood as a testament to unity and resilience. They left the community center with renewed vigor, understanding that while Linda may have played the part of antagonist, together they had woven the threads of a stronger community tapestry. Underneath the glimmering stars, as they walked towards their homes side by side, they felt invincible, knowing they had taken a stand for their integrity and for their neighborhood. And so, as they embraced their newfound freedom, they realized this was merely the beginning of pursuing a future where respect and connection would reign, transforming a battle against manipulation into a victory of unity, civility, and communal heart.